Welcome to Haunted Talks, the official podcast of the Haunted Walk, offering ghost tours and paranormal adventures in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario, and online experiences to anyone in this mortal realm. My name is Jim Dean. I am the creative director, and it is my privilege to be your haunted host for this episode. As a celebrated astronomer, Camille Flammarion unveiled the mysteries of the cosmos, peering into the depths of celestial wonders. However, it is his lesser-known foray into the realm of the supernatural that unveils an intriguing facet of his mysterious persona. Flammarion's insatiable curiosity led him to traverse the blurred lines between the empirical and the ethereal, delving into psychic phenomena, haunted houses, and the unexplained. With a meticulous blend of scientific rigor and a willingness to embrace the inexplicable, Flammarion's work on the supernatural challenges conventional understanding and beckons us to contemplate the vast possibilities that lie beyond the confines of our known world. Join us as we explore his life, his beliefs, and what he considered to be the best evidence of the paranormal. But before we get to that, do you love ghost stories? Are you intrigued by dark history? Join us on a haunted walk, the ultimate spooky adventure in Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, Ontario. Our expert storytellers will take you on a journey through the city's most haunted locations, sharing chilling tales of ghostly encounters and unexplainable happenings. From haunted jails to forgotten graveyards, the Haunted Walk will transport you to another time and place. Join us on a spine-tingling paranormal adventure. Book your tickets now at hauntedwalk.com. Don't forget, as a Haunted Talks listener, you can get 15% off your ghost tour tickets for any of our cities, Kingston, Ottawa, and Toronto, by using the promo code Haunted Talks when purchasing your tickets on our website, hauntedwalk.com. On our website, you can also find information about our online experiences, which can be enjoyed from anywhere in the world. Spend an eerie night in with our Haunting at Home online paranormal adventure, or grab a spot around our virtual haunted campfires and hear some of the best storytellers in the world share their favorite creepy stories. Information on our Haunting at Home, virtual haunted campfires, and our in-person ghost tours can be found on our website, hauntedwalk.com. And if you're enjoying our episodes, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you listen to us, and we would be honored if you recommend the show to anyone you know who loves things that go bump in the night. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, all at Haunted Walk, for the latest updates, new episodes, blog posts, and some finely curated spooky memes. Camille Flammarion, a name that resonates within the scientific and metaphysical communities alike, is regarded as one of the most influential astronomers of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Born on February 26, 1842, in France, Flammarion, a child prodigy, embarked on a career that encompassed both rigorous scientific investigation and a profound fascination with the realm of the supernatural. From an early age, Flammarion demonstrated an insatiable curiosity for the cosmos. Guided by his passion, he dedicated himself to unraveling the mysteries of the night sky. His scientific achievements were groundbreaking, and he was often referred to as the greatest of the living French astronomers. His meticulous observations and rigorous analysis unveiled the secrets of cometary orbits, shedding light on the mysterious nature of those cosmic wanderers. His studies of planetary atmospheres pushed the boundaries of knowledge, deepening our understanding of the intricate dynamics at play within our celestial neighbors. To understand Flammarion in the context of French society at the time and the respect he garnered from around the world, there are reasonable comparisons to be made to more recent figures like Carl Sagan, Stephen Hawking, or Neil deGrasse Tyson. Popularizers of science who, through the use of storytelling, expertly capture the imaginations of their audience while explaining difficult scientific concepts with ease. However, Flammarion's intellectual appetite extended far beyond the realm of traditional science. He harbored an unyielding fascination with the supernatural, the unexplained, and the mystical forces that seem to dance on the fringes of human comprehension. This parallel interest, often regarded as unconventional within the scientific community, set Flammarion apart as a unique and enigmatic figure. In the final years leading up to his death in 1925, Camille Flammarion published a remarkable book titled Haunted Houses. Within its pages, he ambitiously presented a collection of captivating accounts of supernatural phenomena, accompanied by his correspondence with those who had experienced these otherworldly events. The book caused quite a sensation in France, and even before its translation into English, Flammarion was invited to contribute a lengthy article that found its way into several newspapers across North America. This article, distinct from the book but echoing its themes and concepts, provided a concise yet impactful overview featuring some of Flammarion's most cherished examples of credible haunted house stories. I would like to share that article with you. May one believe in haunted houses? Many are the credulous and feeble-witted who believe in them, you say, and from these persons one hears all sorts of old women's tales to make the hair of little children stand on end in terror. But putting their stories aside, can the thinking man of science believe in haunted houses? I believe in them. I believe they have existed and continue to exist. They have been noted in all ages and in all countries. They have their names in all tongues. Haunted houses in English, Spüken in German, Spiritate or Infestate in Italian, Casas de Duendes in Spanish, etc. But before going any further, it is necessary to remark that the subject of haunted houses is open to all kinds of trickery, and has lent itself easily to the projects of rascals who have wished to impose, with more or less stupid farce, upon the average dull intellect of mankind down through the ages. In all times and in tongues are stories of haunted houses, but one can discredit most of them. Some have been the result of hallucinations, illusions, due to hysteria. Others have been reported by the lively imaginations of little children. Some have arisen from the crafty designing of a selfish interest. For instance, houses are known to have been endowed with an evil legend in order that some shrewd fellow might buy them at a low price. Trickeries have been practiced in so-called haunted houses by persons bearing grudges against the proprietors or occupants. There are 1,000 reasons why, at first glance, any story of a haunted house should be deemed suspect. Therefore, it was with a skeptical spirit that I approached the subject of haunted houses. But after examining many hundreds of these stories, I have reached the conclusion that haunted houses exist, perhaps as many real ones as false. Persons should not scoff at the existence of real ones because they have met so many false ones. The fact that false banknotes exist does not prevent real ones from existing too. In examining the testimony about haunted houses, I find that some of it came from men who have devoted their lives to the study of science and truth. I hold the testimony of men of this kind valuable. They are, by their very nature of their calling, sincere and not apt to lie. To go back to one such man takes us to the period about the time of Christ, the person of Pliny the Younger, a friend of the Roman Emperor Trajan and nephew of Pliny the Naturalist, who was killed during the eruption of Vesuvius, which buried Pompeii and Herculaneum in the year 79. All the learned men of that day knew him. He reports in one of his letters the story of another philosopher, Athenodorus, who rented in Athens a haunted house, which no one else was willing to occupy, and who received there a visit from a returning spirit. There was in Athens, he writes, a large and agreeable dwelling, which nobody would occupy because of a ghostly spirit living in it. People heard there at night the sound of chains that seemed at first to come from afar off and gradually to approach. Soon they could see a phantom shape, that of an old man, thin and stooped, and with a long white beard, carrying upon his feet and hands heavy chains, which he shook horribly. From the shaking of these chains came nights of horror, spent without sleep by anyone who inhabited the house. Several people tried to stay there. They were troubled at first with insomnia, then with sickness, so that they even died. Although the specter never appeared during the day, the impressions left by his visits of preceding nights were so vivid that everyone about the place lived in fear. Athenodorus, the philosopher, born in Tarsus, later became the teacher of Augustus. Having arrived in Athens for a long stay, saw this fine house lying vacant and asked to rent it. The price was so low that he asked the reason why, and was told all of the house's history. He decided to take the place and make a personal investigation. He moved in. That night, he ordered the servants to bring him his writing table, tablets, and a pen, and to leave him in the front of the house alone while everyone else retired to the rear. For fear that his imagination should play tricks upon him, after the stories he had heard, and led himself into foolish fears, he applied himself diligently to his writing. The first of the night, a deep silence reigned over the house. But after a while, the sage heard irons rattling, and then the clanking of chains. He did not raise his eyes. He kept writing. The noise drew nearer and nearer, until it seemed to be within the door of his room. Then he looked up. The spectre of which he had been told was standing there and motioning him to follow. Athenodorus returned the gesture, with one indicating that his visitor might wait a while. He was very busy, and he kept on writing. The spectre began to rattle his chain again, making a noise that drove away all possibility of writing. The philosopher looked up again and saw that his guest was still beckoning. This time, he rose and followed, bearing aloft a torch. The phantom preceded him to the courtyard of the house, and there disappeared. The philosopher gathered together some leaves and small sticks by torchlight and marked the spot where the spectre had vanished. The next day, he went to the magistrates of the city and asked them to have the courtyard dug up where he had left the marks. The yard was dug. There was found a skeleton in chains, relic of an ancient crime. After they had taken the chains from the skeleton and reburied with the customary honors for the dead which it had lacked before, it never again troubled the peace of the house. Such is the narrative of Pliny, and the ancients generally considered it as a serious truth. To deny it would be difficult. It is a story that was widely circulated and believed in its time in Athens and in Rome, where Athenodorus himself was known. The Christians of that time believed but looked upon it as the intervention of the devil. The 18th century mocked at it too, but today we know that there is something at the bottom of such a story. For the moment, let us say that Athenodorus saw the phantom, as many other Athenians said they saw, and even that the philosopher seeing it would not prove the spectre real, of flesh and bones, or rather, of bones only, with chains. Nevertheless, it would prove the dead man acted upon the spirit and sight of living observers in order to gain his ends. The phantom did not really hold chains in his hands, that goes without saying, but the ears of people in that house were assailed by the noise which to them meant chains, and their eyes saw something which also brought the vision of chains, and the vision of an old man chained. That the living soul of the dead man had made some manifestation, that it wished a burial in accordance with the custom of the times, and that it obtained it through its manifestation, being understood by an exceptional man, we cannot but admit. We must admit it, because we have learned of similar cases since the time of the Greeks. I alone have read more than a dozen per century in France, Spain, Italy, England, and Germany. Let us turn to more modern evidence. Here's an example of a haunted house carefully set forth by the observer himself, an observer who is a professor of mathematics in a French university, and whom I know to be sincere and truthful. Listen to his own account. I have kept secret for more than 20 years the strange, unheard of facts that I am now detailing with careful accuracy. It was the early days of 1867. My home, situated about 40 meters from the parish church, was an old presbytery which had been turned over to me completely. It had been in a bad state of disrepair in 1865 and had been overhauled thoroughly in 1866 to provide for my coming. It had, upon my arrival, all the appearance of a newly constructed house. The ground floor was too low to be lived in, but it served me as a cellar and woodshed. It was connected with the second floor by a large oak staircase. At the foot of the staircase were two doors, one leading outside and the other into this semi-basement, which had no other entry. I lived there exclusively in the company with my brother, who today is a professor of mathematics, and my sister. Our apartment was composed of 4 large rooms. There was a kitchen, which also served as a dining room, and there were 3 bedrooms. Before retiring, I always closed carefully all openings leading outdoors, and the one door which led downstairs to the ground floor. I had neither cat nor dog, nor birds in a cage. The house having just been repaired, the animals of the neighborhood were not allowed to enter it. I have to tell you, before entering into the heart of my recital, that I'm going to disguise my name and my present residence. The story is confidential as far as my public identity is concerned. One night, in April 1867, I was awakened and startled by a singular noise. Hard blows were being struck upon the table and sideboard in the kitchen, as if someone was wielding a stout stick upon them. I listened. Bang, bang, bang. Then silence. And some instants later, bang, bang, bang. A strange thing, but I felt no fear. I was puzzled. I quickly lighted a candle, leaped from my bed, crossed my chamber and hall, and entered the kitchen. I saw nothing unusual there, and heard not the slightest noise. I went down the staircase. The 2 doors at the bottom were closed, locked, with keys, and the keys were in their locks undisturbed. No human being could have gone through those doors and left them locked with the keys on the inside that way. I went back to the kitchen. I opened the sideboard and looked within. Nothing unusual. By the light of the candle, I looked into the stove and then up the chimney. The tiles which kept the rain from falling upon the hearth and at the same time let the smoke upward were in their proper place. Again, I crossed the kitchen and the corridor. I entered the sleeping rooms of my sister and brother and found them sleeping peacefully. I went back to bed, but hardly had blown out my candle when the noise began again. Bang, bang, bang. Then the plates began to rattle in their racks, and the knives and forks and spoons to dance in their places. And then the chairs to slide about and jump. That lasted until 3 o'clock in the morning. The same noises were renewed the following nights for 2 weeks. Nevertheless, every morning when I arose, I found everything intact, everything in its place, and seemingly just as it was when we had gone to bed. This surprised me, for the glasses, plates had been dancing during the night, in a way that should have reduced them to small chips. Only once was a chair found tipped over. A napkin, which had been thrown over the back of it, had been tossed half a meter away. For the first time since the beginning of these strange manifestations, a shiver of horror and fear crept over me. I felt it gripping me, absurdly, unreasonably. I will confess it to anyone, I was terribly frightened. A little later, before going to bed, I had been drinking some sugar and water. The coffee spoon, which I had used to stir the sugar, I left in the glass. Under it, I had left a little note on which I had written these words: "If it is ghosts which are making this uproar, I beg of them to keep quiet and let us sleep." For more than 3 hours, that spoon was rattled in the glass, with intermittent intervals of scarcely a minute. One time, at least, I believe twice, the glass seemed to roll along the table, back and forth, without rolling off the end and breaking. When I arose the next morning, I found the glass, the spoon, and the note left exactly as they had been placed the evening before. Another night, 3 blows, like those of a stick, sounded upon the edge of my bed. That was a night when I had induced a friend to come sleep with me. He heard the blows and said politely, "I really believe you have some infernal powers and are making this clairvoyance yourself." This friend has signed a statement corroborating the professor's story. Another night, I heard footsteps in the kitchen, heavy and firm. But on arising, could find nothing, nor could I hear any further noises. Another night, when I returned home later than usual, my brother, from his room, heard footsteps in my room. Believing that I had returned, he called out to me to go to bed and let him get some sleep. When I finally did return, he called out to me again, "Are you never going to bed? You've been keeping me awake for an hour." I answered him that I was just returning, but said I understood that he had been kept awake, for as I came up the stairs, I heard someone walking in the kitchen. By this time, this inexplicable uproar of nights had begun to worry me so much that I decided to speak to the village priest about it. That good man received my declaration with more indifference, apparently, than concern. "All that is without great importance," he said. "The house is old. It is a long time since it was blessed. If the noise continues, I will come around and bless the house and pray that the noise may stop. Then perhaps you will not hear it anymore." But I did, and I called in the priest. He blessed the house and prayed, and after that, the noise never occurred again. Now that is very strange too, but it is no more strange nor more astonishing than that the noises should have happened at all. The professor, whom I know, who wrote this article, adds to it corroboration from reputable persons, including the village priest. I have their evidence in my home. What do these observations prove? They prove that things such as haunted houses do exist, and that those who deny their existence are either ignorant of the facts or are guilty of bad faith. To take the testimony of such a group of reputable persons as those cited in this last case and say they are all victims of hallucination is inadmissible. I do not discuss the explanation of these phenomena. I merely state that they exist, I affirm the reality of the haunted house. The explanation to be found is not so simple a matter as the recognition of their existence. The scarcity of authentic observation of haunted houses proves nothing against the reality, as some strange thinking has asserted. In a court of justice, when witnesses called upon to determine questions of fact are those who have seen and heard, naturally, what would one say if one heard the following decision in a court? In view of the fact that 10 men saw the accused commit the crime while several millions did not see him, the accused is acquitted. The millions of persons who have not seen haunted houses do not even a negative value as against the testimony of those who have seen. Yet it is by such reasoning that the opponents of our research into the fields of haunted houses and spirits often argue. The testimony which I have just cited is sufficient for me, knowing the witnesses. I have no doubt that houses are haunted. I know some hundreds of other cases just as incontestable. Here's one which I take from a very rare book, but one that is highly valued by students of the occult, a case which is reported with all the earmarks of authenticity by the son of the observer. This took place in the house of my father. One evening, about 10 o'clock, my mother was awakened by an unaccustomed noise in the kitchen. Separated by the dining room from the chamber where she and my father slept. She roused my father, told him what she had heard, and asked him to go and see if the door of the kitchen, which opened onto the courtyard, had been closed firmly. She thought it must have been a dog, which had entered and made the noise. But a trip to the kitchen showed that everything was in order and that the door was securely fastened. The noise stopped a while, then began again. My father awakened the servants, who slept in another part of the building, and with them made a tour of the whole place, hearing always, but seeing nothing. The noise changed in its place and its nature. It passed into the dining room. There it sounded as if stones weighing at least 20 pounds were falling from a height upon some furniture. After 8 or 10 blows like that, there was one a great deal heavier than the others. And then a pause. Then it seemed as if strong hands were dragging an iron bar over the courtyard pavement. Several of the neighbors were awakened by the noise. They came to the house to find out what was happening and joined my father in further researches. They were in vain. Toward 3 o'clock in the morning, my father bade goodbye to his neighbors and ordered the servants back to bed. He was sure that the noise had not been made by thieves. The noise had lasted for about 4 hours and had been heard by 7 or 8 persons. It stopped about 4 o'clock in the morning. At 7 o'clock, a registered letter arrived announcing to my father that one of his relatives had died during the night between 10 and 11 o'clock, and that before he died, he once again had expressed the hope that my father would take over the guardianship and education of the children he was leaving behind. He had often expressed that desire before, but my father had always been unwilling and had said so. In vain had my father argued with him, citing the multiplicity of his own affairs. In vain he had shown that there were other relatives better able to be the guardians of the dying man's children. He had not been able to turn the man from the idea which he carried with him into the life to come. The coincidence of this death, with the noises which had been heard during the night, made a great impression upon my mother. She was convinced that there was something of a connection between the two events. She insisted that my father carry out the dead man's wishes and take over the guardianship of his children. My father, not sharing her fears, argued with her. At last, in order to calm her, he promised that if the noise was heard again the following night, he would accept the guardianship. Then, convinced that the noises were caused by some plot against him, by persons wishing to make sport of him or get something from him, he laid his plans to catch them at their tricks, if tricks there were. He had 2 men, whom he knew to be strong and courageous, sleep in his room. Then he waited calmly, awake in his bed. At midnight, the noises began again, louder and more terrible than the night before. My father arose and told the 2 men to follow him, to search every cranny of the house, but they were seized with such fright that no words he could utter could persuade them to leave their beds. My father then roused his servants, and with them he scoured the entire house without discovering anyone. The noise lasted only a little while, but it was far more violent than during the evening before. Upon returning to the chamber of my mother, my father yielded to her entreaties. More, he said, to make her happy than on account of any conviction that the noises were due to supernatural causes. He adopted the children of the dead man, and the noises were never heard again in the house. 3 or 4 witnesses of those strange events still live who can attest to the truth of my narrative. I have often heard my father tell it, and he always professed to believe there was some other cause to the affair than a supernatural one, but he could not say what it was. Sometimes he was almost convinced it was a supernatural manifestation. One thing in particular made him think so. During the first night, when the noise was at its height, my father called his dog. The dog was enormous, very strong, very brave. My father's call sufficed ordinarily to bring him on the bound, but this time it took long urging on the part of my father to bring the dog at all, and when he came, it was crawling on its belly and shivering with fear. This made a great impression on my father, but he would never admit that his dead relative had been the cause of those unearthly noises. Nevertheless, he carried out the dead man's wishes. I've given the reader 3 widely varying instances of haunted houses. I could just as easily cite 10, 20, or 100, for they are very numerous, and accounts of this nature, subjected to close study, can only be taken for authentic. What is their explanation? A certain number of them are connected with the souls of the departed. Others do not appear to have any connection with the survival of human beings. Such are those which in Germany go under the name of poltergeist, from polter meaning to make noise, and geist or spirit, thence noisy spirits. Noises, tappings, uproars, all sorts of sounds, blows struck, steps heard, rustlings, murmurs, moans, etc., all astonishing, surprising, sometimes terrifying. These things are all common occurrences in houses where it is impossible to link them with any natural cause. In the phenomena which I have cited, there are two elements face to face. The first is the human faculty of the observer, and the second is a psychic element, invisible and exterior to our natures. The universe is an immense system of dynamics, of interacting forces, the extent of which science is barely beginning to appreciate. We are far from knowing everything. Haunted houses belong in the category of those problems which offer themselves to our attention, make us regret our limited knowledge, and arouse in us a desire to study. Flammarion's interest in the supernatural, while met with intrigue and curiosity by many, was not without its critics. Some within the scientific community dismissed his forays into the unknown as ventures beyond the bounds of empirical science, challenging the validity and rigor of his research. The book Haunted Houses was reviewed by the magician and famous debunker Harry Houdini, who wrote, "It fails to supply adequate proof of the veracity of the conglomeration of hearsay it contains. It must, therefore, be considered a collection of myths." It was certainly true that Flammarion also had some rather unique ideas and theories, most notably in 1910, for the appearance of Halley's Comet. He believed that gas from the comet's tail would impregnate the Earth's atmosphere and possibly snuff out all life on the planet, which thankfully was not the case. He was also convinced that souls, after the physical death of the body, pass from planet to planet, progressively improving at each new incarnation, which he wrote about in his book, The Plurality of Inhabited Worlds. Yet Flammarion remained undeterred by his skeptics, recognizing that scientific progress often requires venturing into uncharted territories and questioning the limits of human understanding. In the broader context of his career, Camille Flammarion stands as a unique and multifaceted figure, straddling the worlds of scientific exploration and metaphysical inquiry. He defied conventional categorizations, refusing to be confined by the boundaries of scientific orthodoxy. His legacy lies in his ability to bridge these seemingly disparate realms, inviting us to contemplate the vastness of the universe and the mysteries that lie beyond our grasp. In the epilogue to Haunted Houses, his final published words, he wrote, "We have not been able, as we had hoped to include the numerous and incontestable observation concerning apparitions of the dead to the dying, which are evidence of the survival of those dead and have their own special value. Neither have we been able to concern ourselves with the phantoms themselves, those which have been seen and heard. There we have a whole field of complex study, which opens unexpected horizons. It seems to me that the time has come to devote, in spite of the apparent paradox, a special volume to ghosts, methodically discussed in the light of observational science. That will be the subject of my next work. Yes, the unknown world is vaster and more important than the known." Sadly, that next book never came. In the posthumously published book, Phantoms and the Sciences of Observation, Camille Flammarion's views on ghosts were summarized. According to Flammarion, ghosts have undeniably been observed, and it is incorrect to simply dismiss them. He categorizes most ghostly experiences as subjective, some as illusory hallucinations, and others as objective phenomena independent of the observers. Flammarion also notes that given the current state of scientific knowledge, explaining these experiences is still impossible. I do hope that if Camille Flammarion's soul still exists on this planet, on another, or somewhere in between, he would be proud of how we approach the paranormal, and that we are continuing his work by collecting stories, not believing everything we hear, but recognizing there is so much we still don't understand about ourselves, our world, and the universe. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. If you are interested in reading Camille Flammarion's book, Haunted Houses, it is available for free on Google Books, and I've put a link in the show notes. If you enjoyed particularly the first ancient ghost story that Flammarion shared in the article, I would highly encourage you to listen to episodes 124 and 125, The First Ghosts, Part 1 and 2, with the British Museum's Dr. Irving Finkel. For more information about our ghost tours, as you're planning your summer's paranormal adventures, please visit our website, which is hauntedwalk.com. Be sure to connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And be sure to follow the show wherever you listen. And if you have a moment to rate and review the show, it would greatly be appreciated. As always, a special thanks to our Haunted Talks team, including Michelle Dennis, our outstanding audio editor. Until we meet again, sweet dreams.